Look, Medic doesn't need any buffs, but it would be cool if all of his weapons were at least viable in the right situation. As it stands, there's a pretty big gap between the UIbersaw / Solemn Vow and the Amputator, and an even larger gap between the Amputator and VIta-saw. So I thought it would be fun to try and rebalance the melees, making it a more difficult choice between them that's dependent on the current situation rather than just this weapon's better, use it. So right off rip, I think the UIbersaw and Solemn Vow are already in a pretty good position and trade blows with each other as the best choice based on the game, so I'm not going to touch them. If the enemy team has bad players and you can get away with free melee hits, the UIbersaw wins out. If you can't get any freebies, you might as well use the Solemn Vow for the constant and completely passive information it provides. But where does that leave the Amputator, VIta-saw, and stock? Well, stock melees are all the same and aren't allowed to have stat text, so there's pretty much nothing I can do there. But we're going to get into it with the Amputator and VIta-saw. First and foremost, I don't want to remove the VIta-saw or Amputator from the game, replacing them with a completely different weapon design-wise. I tried to keep as much of the melee's individual flavor as I could, which unfortunately wasn't much in the case of the VIta-saw. I also decided pretty early on into my brainstorming that for a melee weapon to be worth using on Medic, it has to give him something he wants, something that plays into the core design of the class. And what does Medic want? He wants to build Uber as fast as possible. He wants information on teammates and enemies so he can make better informed decisions. He wants to heal his team as fast as possible so they can keep fighting. And finally, the Medic wants to stay alive so he can do all of the above with as little downtime as possible. The UIbersaw already helps Medic with his Uber charge need, and the Solemn Vow gives him more information. So with my reworks, I'll be playing into the two remaining aspects of the class, healing and survivability. As such, each weapon will offer a unique enhancement to Medic without stepping on the toes of the others. For example, a melee in the vein of the Diamondback that gave you guaranteed crits on assists or Ubers would be a terrible design. Not fun to play against and actively competing with the UIbersaw as the weapon to use if you think you're going to be in situations where you need to throw some hands. One or the other would be deemed better and nobody would use the alternative. Conversely, when weapons compete to create the optimal playstyle instead of stat for stat within the same playstyle, we get more exciting choices where one cannot ever be the absolute best in every situation. Stock rocket launcher and direct hit are fantastic examples of two nicely balanced weapons in the same slot that create different playstyles instead of the better soldier weapon and the worse soldier weapon. This is because the optimal playstyle is very fluid and changes on a game by game or map by map basis. Now without further ado, the Amputator. I really like the Amputator on paper. It gives the Medic a way to heal in an AoE, which can be insanely valuable, so I decided to lean into that. Unfortunately, the taunt is far too niche and puts you at a significant risk to spies, bombing soldiers, and basically anyone on the enemy team who figures out what you're doing. Additionally, the extra regen is pretty much irrelevant since it only applies when the weapon is active and it scales from 1 to 3. It's not actually a flat 3, so you're better off healing any damaged player at all with your meta beam for the double passive regen instead. I know a few choke heavy maps minimize risk and make the weapon pretty solid, especially since the healing builds Uber, but for it to compete with the UIbersaw or Solemn Vow, it needs to be good enough in more general conditions. So my idea is to make the taunt much better but impose limits on when you can use it. Instead of being able to taunt whenever, it would work like a soldier banner. You would only be able to perform the taunt after healing 500 health to allies, and that's actually healing damaged health bars. Applying overheal wouldn't count. Because of this new limitation, you will now be able to move at 50% speed during the taunt, and it will be able to apply overheal to teammates. The overheal would allow the Amputator to differentiate itself from the crossbow, because right now you can usually crossbow 3 to 4 people up just as fast as an Amputator taunt would heal them without putting yourself at unnecessary risk. I toyed with the idea of letting the healing affect you as the Medic instead of overhealing teammates, but giving Medic too many tools to keep himself alive without direct help from his teammates goes against the way the class is designed and could get very annoying to play against very quickly. A Medic caught without a team should be a free kill to any damage class unless the Medic severely outplays the situation or the other class makes a critical mistake. And while we're at it, let's also make that +3 health regen passive instead of while active. Being the healing focused melee, the minus 20% damage still makes sense, giving up some self-defense for the ability to AoE heal every once in a while. I think this change would make the Amputator a bit more useful and a lot more fun to use, while letting it be more applicable in situations beyond those heavy choke maps. Yet you still are at the mercy of any enemies that find you with 50% move speed and no way to cancel the animation, so you better be smart about when you let it rip. But being able to apply overheal in an AoE cannot be underestimated, making the reward way more worth the risk. risk. I could easily see medics building the Amputator charge pre-round to buff everyone up right as the gates open, or popping it when you have 4 to 5 people stacking on the cart to keep that push going. Honestly, the current Amputator doesn't need a lot to be on the UIbersaw level. Giving extra passive regen and letting medic apply AoE overheals might be a bit much, but I digress. Now we get to go from a weapon that's super close to being generally viable to one that's not even usable. Let me tell you, the VIta-saw is down bad. There's a very valid argument that it's worse than the bone saw because of the -10 health. In order to receive any so-called benefit to this weapon, you need to die first. But oh, thank God, because it makes dying easier. Wait a second. Dying isn't exactly something you want to be doing very often on medic, and something you should be doing less often as you improve. And it's not even just dying. You have to melee an enemy before you die. Guess what other weapon gives a bonus to Uber immediately when you hit an enemy and doesn't even require death? With the current VIta-saw, if you play a round where you either don't manage to hit an enemy or don't die at all, you're just walking around with a -10 max health debuff the whole game. The VIta-saw never rewards you. It only slightly diminishes the punishment of death. It will always be better to just not die altogether. But I ain't a quitter, and I wanted to see if I could make a medic melee that's still usable with a max health negative. So instead of needing to hit enemies with your melee as a medic, something you should never be doing, and if you are, you should be getting 25%, baby. Instead, every time you get a kill or an assist, the weapon will passively remove any debuffs from you and instantly heal you for 15 HP, which can overheal. The weapon also gives you, as the medic, not your patience, double overheal duration. For the negative, slap that bitch with -25 max health and no random crits. Now, rather than rewarding you for dying, the VIta-saw helps prevent you from dying, but only around teammates fighting enemies. On your own, the overheal will still run out at 2.1 HP per second, and you'll probably be weaker than a normal medic. Giving medic better survivability overall without the protection of his team is a slippery slope since he's already the most impactful class in the game. No random crits means you'll also lose way more 1v1s in casual, as Valve intended. Being able to heal up a bit and remove debuffs is super enticing for solo medics because it increases survivability beyond just your passive regen. Longer lives means more healing, more Ubers, and more wins. But remember, you're a 125 HP class now, so you can only be overhealed to 187, not the usual 225 that medics enjoy. This keeps the weapon balanced when other medics are on your team, since even if they overheal you themselves, you still can't survive a double pill, double rocket, melee crit, double meat shot, etc. like a 225 health medic could. Basically, it gives you better survivability from chip damage, being able to cleanse afterburn, healing up random sticky or rocket splash, but it doesn't help you survive a straight 1v1 or focus fire very well. I think a weapon like this would make playing solo medic much more bearable without making him unkillable. Listen, these rebalances are by no means perfect. They're just what my monkey brain could come up with without changing the theme of the weapon too harshly. The numbers would likely need tweaking, but I think having these additional options would play nicely into different playstyles of medic. You have your high risk, high reward option with the UIbersaw, your conservative, always active, passive benefit with the Solemn Vow that lets you play safer and get a few extra picks. The Amputator would enable you to increase your overall healing output and apply buffs faster, and the VIta-saw helps nullify chip damage, making you more survivable as long as you're properly farming assists. But hey, if you have better ideas, let me know in the comments. And stay tuned for the primary weapon rebalance sometime in the future. There's a lot more work to be done there. Unless it was like...
Bison, I think.
Oh, he's dead!
Nope, he's gone. Okay. Goodbye.
Oh, God.
I don't know how